Hey everyone, I'm wondering if you could do me a favor. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you take a few seconds to rate it and review it on whatever platform you're listening on? I'd really appreciate it because it really helps this podcast get found by other people who might benefit from hearing stories of these amazing people I've had the privilege of interviewing who are doing the Jesus stuff. Speaking of amazing people, you're not going to believe it, but in this episode, I have the absolute joy of talking with Dr. Rene Bravo of Bravo Pediatrics. I've known Dr. Bravo for over a decade, and he's honestly saved my family's life so many times in so many ways over the years. This is a special one for me, and I'm confident that you're going to love this conversation as well. We talk about Dr. Bravo's experience with cancer when he was 13 years old, which led him to becoming a physician, as well as his journey of following Jesus and the work he's doing today locally and around the world. Enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Rene Bravo. Christians often talk about following Jesus, but what happens when you actually catch him? When normal people discover an extraordinary vision for their lives? These are the people doing the Jesus stuff, and these are their stories. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Can't go.
Yeah.
Just it's my day off, and that's never a bad day.
That's good. What do you do on your days off?
Um, Chores. I primarily catch up on things that have been neglected around the house, and and I do a little bit of hobby stuff, and I go exercise and make phone calls to people that I should have called earlier in the week and didn't. You know,
Yeah.
driven by guilt a lot. So
Perfect.
yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks for being willing to chat. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, it's fine. I'm honored that you'd even think that I had something worth saying, worth
Oh yeah,
hearing.
yeah. No, you were. My wife said you should ask Dr. Bravo if he'd be willing to be on the podcast, and I said no, no, no. He's too big. He's too famous. I couldn't possibly. So it took me a couple weeks to build up the courage, but I finally did. And so my wife also demanded that I get a few facts straight
Okay,
right from the get go.
all right.
So we met you the day after our son was born, which
Uh-huh.
was 13 years ago, and
Wow.
you were instantly one of my wife's favorite people on the planet. And
Okay.
she's even made a shirt. I don't know if you've seen this thing. She's even made a shirt that has a quote from you that says, "You can do it, Dr. Bravo," that she wears all the time. And she remembers you saying on multiple occasions that she's one of your favorite moms that you see in your practice. So the world wants to know, Dr. B, true or false?
True. All
Yes,
true.
all true. Okay, good.
One thing that's unique about your wife is she really does make me laugh. She's funny.
Yes, she is so funny.
And she's transparent, and she's very honest. I love that.
Y- she is, and well, I'm glad to hear that. Despite the fact that I think she cries literally every time she walks into your office and sees you. So, oh man, that's good. So, okay, so I've always known you. We've always known you as Dr. Bravo, but
Yeah,
Rene Bravo wasn't always Dr. Bravo. So
correct.
there's a lot of holes in this story for me that I'm really really curious about.
All right,
So
sure.
let's just start. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Florida, in Miami, Florida. Lived in a little part of Florida they call Little Havana, and I spent the first 3 years of or 4 years of my life there until my parents got the correct inkling that they needed to move out of Florida to California. Back in the early 1960s, late 1950s, California was the Golden State, and people were flocking to California in droves. They were in their late 20s, trying to build a life, understanding that the climate and the temperature of Florida probably wasn't as good as California. They kept hearing from their relatives, "Come out to California; it's a nice place to live." And so I'm very glad that they made the trek across the country.
Yeah. What was the impetus besides just being California? What were your parents doing for work?
Well, I grew up in a home. My parents were immigrants. They both came from Latin America. My mother was Cuban, and my father's Ecuadorian, and they met in Miami, married and raised a family. At least started a family there. But their impetus really was just to get work. My dad was a laborer, and he that man worked his entire life extremely hard, and so he figured that there was a lot of work in California, and that's what he came for. He eventually became a welder, and my mom was just my mom. She worked for the airlines and did a lot of clerical work, and wonderful people. Recently, they've gone to heaven, but they were really just salt of the earth types of people. Very hardworking, very dedicated, very faithful to their families, to the Lord, and just to this country. They are very patriotic Americans also.
Yeah. And how old were you when your family moved to California?
Three and a half or four. And then we
Okay.
moved to Bell. I grew up in Bell, actually. All of my memories that are formative are in the Los Angeles area. I grew up in Bell and Cudahy, the Huntington Park area, which is known as Southeast Los Angeles County. Um, Not a place that I would probably walk around in now, but back then it wasn't as rough as it is now. But some people would call it the inner city. I just called it home. And I grew up there, went to high school, and those are the years that formed my life.
And what was your life like in those years? How many siblings did you have, and what were you doing during those times?
Well, I have a brother I'm the oldest. I have a brother and I have a sister. My brother is a disabled family physician, and my sister was educated as a school teacher, but she's just been a stay-at-home mom for all these years. And I don't want to say just because she works pretty hard. And so I was the oldest of three. Um, And I grew up in that part of Los Angeles. Went to L.A. Unified Schools. Was the product of that environment, and really, um, it was. I still go back and look at the area and realize that although people from the outside will see things that are maybe a little bit dark, I thought it was a great place to grow up, and I had a great childhood because of my parents.
So you end up after high school. I know we're skipping forward a few years, but you end up
Yeah,
going to Point Loma Naz University.
yeah.
Why there?
Well, that's a good question. I can give you the Point Loma answer. I'm on the board of trustees there now, but I'll give you the real answer. The real answer is this: when I graduated from high school, or it was my senior year, I was an okay student. I wasn't a great student, but I came from a part of L.A. County that a lot of the people felt needed to be socially engineered. So they were bringing kids out of the inner city and giving them opportunities. So I was going to USC. I mean, I wanted to be a USC Trojan. I had this all down. I grew up near USC and loved USC football. But one day, my pastor came to me and said, "Hey, you got to check out this little Christian college in San Diego called Point Loma." And I remember thinking, well, okay, I'll check it out. Um, it was, and he told me, oh, they have a good pre-med program because I'd already figured out in high school that I wanted to be a doctor. So my friend and I, we drove to San Diego that day. I remember the day very well. I was 17. Drove up the drive, crested the hill, and went through the guard shack. And right in front of us was the expanse of the Pacific Ocean. One of the most beautiful scenes I'd ever seen. And then the second thing we saw as I was walking down is a group of, perhaps 7 or 8 young ladies dressed very, very immodestly, I would say, for the era. And I said, "What is happening here?" You
Yeah.
know, and so between the allure of the view and the other possibilities that tugged on a 17-year-old, plus the fact that I walked into one of the science buildings, and immediately one of the professors reached out to me, grabbed my hand, took me in his office, and asked me about myself. And I said, "Man, this place they really want you to come here." And so I went home and told my parents that I was not going to go to USC. My mother was very happy about that. She was very supportive. My dad said, "You can't go there because you're going to be a pastor." if you go there, and you're not supposed to be a pastor, you're supposed to be a doctor. So my mother talked my dad into it, and I went to Point Loma, and the rest is history.
Well, why was your dad so focused on you being a doctor?
He really wasn't. He just knew that was my ambition and my dream. And as a good dad, I think he said, "Man, this 17-year-old's not thinking like I would think." So but anyhow, it was a good decision because that's where I met my wife. And had I gone to USC, I'm not sure what would have happened.
Growing up in a Christian home, I'm
Yeah,
curious how I'm curious about your faith growing up.
yeah.
Was it your parents' faith? Did you relate to Jesus on a personal level at that point, or did that come later?
I would tell you this. It came later. Um, Growing up in a Christian home was something that I took for granted. And when I say Christian home, I mean we were not the family that did nightly devotionals and all of the things you're supposed to do. And Frank, we were the family that worked really hard trying to get by and just make it. Uh, and the faith that we had was really brought in by my dad and my mom because they both believed very strongly that believers were the types of people we wanted to hang around with. I got cancer when I was 14, which really shaped my worldview quite a bit too. Also fueled my desire to become a physician. But when in the home that we grew up in during that time in high school, going to church, I was involved in the youth group, but my faith was really something that didn't become mine till I went to college. Because I learned, and I'll just be very transparent about this, because I know kids struggle with this. You know, it was very easy to be two people, one person at school and another person at church. And I had good pastors, good youth pastors, etc. But I never really understood what it meant to be fully devoted to Jesus until I went to college. High school taught me about what were the rules were about. College taught me about what it is to have it in your heart. And that was the big difference. I knew the rules, I knew the theology, I knew everything going in. In fact, I would tell you that my salvation experience never happened at church. It happened on a school bus going to a football game in high school. And I'll never forget that experience, if I can share that with you, because that is
Yeah,
a
please.
pivotal part of my testimony. Um, I was always, I was a smart kid. I thought I had a fairly high self-esteem in terms of how kids are then, and I thought I was pretty smart. I could pull off, being the cool kid at school and being the churchy kid at church. And there was this one kid in that used to hang around with us, and my friends were of mixed belief systems. Let me put it that way. But one day we were sitting in the bus, and they started taunting the Christian kid, and he was sitting a row in back of me, and they were calling him names, calling him Jesus freak, and everything else. And I don't know what started it, but it was pretty vicious. And I was sitting there quietly, remembering thinking, "Man, this is really bad. Why are they making fun of him like that?" You know. And then I heard a little voice in my head and said, "Well, are you a Jesus freak? Are you going to stand up and say something? Are you just going to sit there and let them make fun of him?" And it became overwhelming to me at that moment. I said to myself, "Whoa." And it was clear to me, if I did not stand up and tell them that I too was included in their taunting and their derision, then I wasn't going to be standing up for the Lord. And it doesn't sound like a big deal now, but back then, man, when you're
Oh yeah.
16, man, you want to fit in. You don't want to be that kid. And I remember looking at my friend who was being just brutalized because he was a believer, and he looked me in the eyes. He didn't say anything. I knew what he was thinking, and then I just stood up and said, "Well, if you want to make fun of him, make fun of me too, because I'm a Jesus freak, and I stand with him." And I remember that moment. That moment was that was the moment that I knew in my heart that there were things more important than being cool and being accepted, and that your faith was something that you had to have. Interestingly, after that, where I really subdued my own ego and let the Lord lead, they stopped. Actually, it was interesting. They all stopped. They said like, "Whoa, whoa, what's this? Bravo, you're like one of them, you know, you know, you." And so it stopped the taunting, but for me it was a seminal moment. It would have been very easy for me to keep my mouth shut um, and not engage with that.
Yeah.
But that was the moment that I felt that my salvation was real and it was starting to become mine because, and it wasn't in a church and it wasn't in a youth group and it wasn't the times that everybody runs up to summer camp to the altar. It was that time when you said, man, okay, I stand up, I stand with you no matter what the consequences was. And
Yeah.
so that's the date that I marked that. It was on a game bus to Gardena High School. Um, we're a bunch of guys in there going to and I don't even remember if we won or lost the game, but I do remember the next day that something was different about the way I viewed the world.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. It's amazing. And then you said that in college it sort of, I guess, grew even more and you matured in your faith. What was it about that college experience that kind of took your faith to the next level?
College was different. Going to a small Christian college, you get the perception sometimes that everybody that goes there is a just perfect Christian, and that is the opposite of what really is. Christian colleges can be very challenging to you, and I went in there with a preconceived notion. And part of our education at Point Loma, I was a biology major, but they wanted us to take a year of Bible studies, or excuse me, biblical studies and upper division theology. And I took a class and it was really fun because, boy, this wasn't biology, this wasn't science, it was different. And I remember in my Christian holiness class, um, having professors who would tear down all of your arguments and who would argue back with you about things you believed. And at some point, I just threw my hands up and I said, "What do I really believe?" And I remember the second part of my consecration to the Lord was it was a Friday night, and I was taking this class, and I really wanted to know more and deeper what was going on. And so and it dawned on me that I really didn't want to go to church or belong to any religion because it was culturally part of my existence. I wanted it to be real. I wanted to be mine. And I didn't want some imaginary friend that everybody prays to and believes does magic tricks for them. I wanted to have a relationship with the living God that was solid and that I could trust for the rest of my life. And by myself, again, not in a church, not in a sanctuary. I remember in my car, I went by myself down to Shelter Island. I remember one Friday night, I was kind of feeling kind of low because everybody had a date and I didn't have a date. And gosh, uh, and I remember getting my Bible out and just reading it and just getting this overwhelming feeling that the Lord was real, that this whole adventure was really not in my doing but His doing. And I really just said again to the Lord, I consecrate myself to you. Whatever you want, I want. I want to be yours. And that was another moment where there was something that supernatural that came over me, whether it's a feeling, whether it's an emotion, whether it was cognitive, I don't know. But something happened. And being a man of science, I will tell you this, I'm not one of these kind of crazy, I need magic tricks from the Lord type of guy to see things, and I won't go into the signs and wonders movement, but some of that is I'm not a mystic, so to speak. But I did feel something very different that has sustained me now for the rest of my life. And I'll tell you what, after going through this adventure called medicine and helping people and watching people come into the earth, come to be born and watching people die, I've realized that we are a lot more than what the world tells us we are. We are
Yeah.
more than bags of chemicals and organic reactions. We are a human, a soul. We are spirit, and there is a deeper dimension to humans.
Well, I want to talk to you about the intersection of your faith and your work, because I think so often, for many Christians, we think of those things as mutually exclusive.
Sure.
I know you don't. But let's go back to high school. without just stating the obvious, you mentioned that you had had cancer as a child, and that kind of prompted you to pursue medicine. But why did it do that?
Um, Being a doctor was something that I didn't envision early on in my life, and it wasn't until um, the earthquake of 1971. That was the time that was another seminal event. That was a Silmar earthquake, 71. I was a kid, I think 13, 12, 13, and uh, during the earthquake, I ran out of the house. It was about 6 a.m. in the morning. There's a point to this I'm going to get to in a second here. But when I ran out of the house in the dark, I fell down the stairs. I remember thinking, because that was a terrible earthquake, thinking, man, the house is going to collapse. And I remember as I left, I ran out the house. I left my family in there, and I said, okay, everyone for himself. I'm out of here. Um, but I fell down and hurt my leg. My parents took me to the hospital. I was one of the injuries of that earthquake, incidentally, the statistics. So I went to the hospital and I didn't break anything, but I really bruised up. But while I was there, the doctor noticed there was a lump, on the top of my leg. And he asked me, well, how long has that been there? And I said, I don't know. Like most kids, 13, I don't know. Don't bother me. Please don't bother me with questions. I'm not interested in interacting with you right now, person with the white coat on. Um, just do what you need to do, and I can go back to my life. But no, the adults wouldn't let go. They were like ridiculous. They were insistent on finding out what this lump was that had been there probably a year. So the next day they sent me to the orthopedic hospital, and I was at the children's hospital there. They sent me to the orthopedic hospital, and the young intern looked at it, and they did a biopsy. They removed it, and then a couple days later they called my parents up and they said, well, I'm sure I know what they told my parents, but I remember something happened because suddenly my parents were very solemn, and uh, I thought, that's kind of weird. I didn't really care because I was 13. And then suddenly my pastor showed up from church. I said, what's up with this? So the pastor shows up. You know, when the pastor shows up, something's going on, okay, when you're
Right.
13. And he said, well, and then he brought me down into the living room and they said, you have cancer. I remember sitting there thinking, okay, that's nice. Um, we'll fix it and I can get on with life. I really was not affected adversely yet.
Hmm.
Um, and then my mom started crying, and my dad. I said, "What is with these guys, really?" You know, because I was fairly sure that whatever this was, we could just fix it. And then as they took me to other doctors, and then they did other things, they started doing tests and bone marrows and just brutal things. It became apparent to me, especially when I went to the City of Hope, and they started radiation therapy after surgery and all that stuff. And then I started looking at all the other kids with bald heads, and one by one over the year, I started watching something unfold before me. All these kids would start to disappear, and one by one, every kid in the room really did vanish, and I was the only one left. And it didn't strike me until my 14th year of life, especially with this little young girl who was about 13. She was pretty cute. And I kind of got a little crush on her because I was 14. And one day she never came back. Um, then, then it dawned on me how serious this was. And then shortly after that, I said, when I was talking to some of the doctors, I think I can do this. Because I had to find a reason for this. Um, why I was the one that was living and no one else seemed to be living through this. And that was where I desired to be a doctor. And it's a decision that was the correct one, I would say. And I went through the City of Hope. I went through all the things. They gave me a couple of admonitions there at the City of Hope. They told me that I would never have children. That was one of the things they were very sure about, that the radiation therapy would render me incapable of having children. Remember, at the age of 16 years of age, I've said to myself, wow, that's great. You're never going to have kids. Wow. Wow. I remember they were like all sad and everything. And I was like at 16, I was thinking, what a bonus. Um, and so anyhow, that continued, and then I went to college, and in my journey in college, through all the things that I was going through, I was exploring my own Christianity, my salvation, the reality of life, the fact that God had a real plan. I mean, before the purpose driven life, I was actually already writing my own purpose driven life in my head. And I remember none of that really mattered until I met my future wife. The first thing that we talked about, I remember on the first date we had, she said, um, I want to have a lot of kids. I remember that specifically, because suddenly the discussion that we had years earlier with the oncologists became very apparent to me. And she said, I said, I remember looking at her and I couldn't say anything. I was like, how am I going to handle this? Do I just keep it to myself? Do I
Right.
trick her into marrying me and and then reveal the truth? I just looked at her and I said, well, I got news for you. I was told that I can't have kids. And thinking that this person who was the love of my life at that moment would probably, because when I met my wife, I knew I was going to marry her within a couple of minutes, honestly.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, they threw this piece of information out. She looked back at me. She says, "Then we'll adopt."
Oh, wow.
That was her first response. Um, Fast forward a few years after marriage, actually within a year after marriage, knowing that we couldn't have children, she got pregnant.
What are the odds?
And the only thing that and all of the things that he had told me were did not come to pass. I actually could have kids. And not only the only thing they didn't tell me is I couldn't have girls. I had a bunch of
Right. Three
boys.
boys. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I had five boys.
You have
Yeah,
five boys?
I
Oh
had
my
five
gosh.
boys. Yes, and so that was the miracle. And during that time, interestingly, my mom, who rest in peace, told me that when they told me when I was 16 that I couldn't have kids, she came to me after praying. She's a really fervent prayer warrior. She said, "The Lord has told me you will have children."
Wow.
And I said, okay, thanks, Mom. We won't talk about this again, all right?
Yeah.
But but she was right. She was right, and so that's another part of the of what's developed my life. I mean, I've faced death a few times in my life, and yet the Lord has always been faithful and shown me that He is in control when man is not. Um,
Yes.
and being a man of science, and I am a logical, reasoned human being, I know that there are some things that happen that cannot be explained based on the biology and the physics of our existence.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that comes to pass in your practice now, which let's talk a little bit about that. So I think I have these dates right. You graduate UCSF in 83
Correct.
and then Stanford in 86.
Correct.
And then how do you end up on the Central Coast?
Well, that I knew no one when I got here. It's going to be a fairly simple. I came camping here at the end of my intern year from Palo Alto. We stopped halfway. I was on my way to Los Angeles to see my folks. I had two little kids in tow, and we went to camping at Grover City. My kids loved a town that was named after Grover from Sesame Street. That's what they thought. It was named after Sesame Street Grover. And when I started looking around the Central Coast, because we had honeymooned in Morro Bay and Cambria a few years earlier, but I loved it here. I thought this is a really nice place. It's halfway between her family in the Bay and my family in Los Angeles. It's a small town. People are nice. They needed intensive care. They needed neonatal intensive care developed here during the mid '80s, and I had that training from Stanford. And so I actually nailed down a job here a year before I finished. I was the first one in my residency class to get a job. I turned down a fellowship in neonatal medicine there at Stanford just to come here because I knew that I wanted to raise a family, and for whatever reason, I had a strong tug to come here. And now I realize that I was supposed to be here.
Well, if nothing more than for my family, and we're grateful for it.
Well,
So let's talk a little bit about the work you're doing now with Bravo Pediatrics and beyond. So when did Bravo Pediatrics begin?
I was in a couple of medical groups. I came here with with the San Luis Clinic in '86. Joined Pediatric Associates, which is a wonderful single specialty pediatric group. Great men, great pediatricians that I started with. Dr. Patterson, Tedford, Tadone, Eckergren. These were great guys. I mean, really seminal people, very instrumental in mentoring me. And then we sold our practice to Mission Medical, and then 2000 when that group fell apart, meaning the whole that was during an era of managed care consolidation in medical history. I decided to go out on my own and form my own practice. I remember thinking I was 42, thinking I can't go through another group breakup. And so I formed my own practice. I told myself I would never have another partner. I would just be by myself. This was the way I wanted to do things. I needed a committee of one and no meetings. And that's what a committee of one offers you, no meetings.
Right.
Um, but that wasn't what God wanted. And eventually, 20 years ago, I started in a little office off of California and built it now into the Bravo Pediatrics medical group where we have four physicians and a PA and a wonderful nurse practitioner, wonderful PA. And I'm blessed, I really am in a practice that I really truly love my employees. I got great people working for me. And the docs that work for me, they're just solid human beings. They're good human beings, and so I'm in a good place. I really feel blessed because of that. It hasn't always been easy or smooth in medical practice, especially these days when everybody really uh, has a medical degree from the internet.
Yeah.
It's been a little more challenging, but I'm in a good place.
Well, and you've got a pretty good looking office manager, I hear as well.
Yeah, that's the one thing. God bless her, my office manager. Yeah, we kind of got a thing going, me and the office manager. When I married her 40 years ago, she was a piano performance major in college. That's where I met her. She was, and she's very gifted actually in music, um, and she wasn't but boy, when we opened the office in 2000, that was a mutual work. Her and I, a partnership. She was going to handle the billing collections, and she was going to learn everything about running an office, and I was going to practice the medicine. And that's how it's been since then. She's still doing it. I'm trying to get her to retire a little bit because we have grandkids now.
Right, right. Good luck.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, there's another, just to clarify, our daughter, is, 9, 10, going on, you know, 17, 18.
Yes.
Um, but my wife, I think, probably took a blood oath with you that you can't retire until she's grown. So, just for the record, I need that
Okay.
just out there.
We've got it out there now. No,
Yeah, yeah,
actually, I'm
yeah.
not making any plans to retire. I still. This is going to sound goofy, but it's just true. Um, I'm still waiting to go to work. So it's not work. It's
That's
never been
great.
work. I really like it. I mean, going into a room, dealing and seeing these young, beautiful kids with their entire lives in front of them, families that are just trying to honestly make it and do the best they can. I mean, what's not to like about that? Um, it is really one of the marvels. I used to always say, I don't say it much anymore, but I used to say, I can't believe they pay me to do this. This is just too much fun. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the way I kind of do approach my professional life. It is my calling. It is what I was supposed to do with the life and the time that I was given. I never take a minute, I never take a day, or never take a month for granted. And that's why I try to live very, very fully because it is just loaned to us. And I knew when
Yeah.
I was facing my mortality when I was 14 and facing the reality of mortality, I didn't have the chance as a teenager to become uh, to become immortal, so to speak, like a lot of them feel like they are. And that really did flavor the rest of how I view life. I
Yeah.
grew up fast.
Yeah, I bet. And, just I think on behalf of every parent on the Central Coast, we would say thank you to the Lord for giving you this calling and for your obedience and pursuing it. I know, I mean, as a parent, and you know this too, you just sometimes are at your wits' end and you don't know what to do. And I just walking into your office, and when you walk through the door, there's just an immediate sense of comfort and a belief in parents that is just incredible that we feel, and just we just know it's going to be okay when Dr. Bravo walks in the room. So
You're
thank
kind
you.
to say that. I mean, I'm blushing when you say that, but I'll tell you what. I mean, I a doctor is made by the patients that the Lord sends into his path, and every patient that comes into my path, I see them as what they are: people who sometimes are scared, sometimes are worried, sometimes they're happy, sometimes they don't want to be there. I mean, all these things are normal, but a doctor is only made by the patients that he has. That's the true thing. That's the real thing. I'm not a great doctor. I really do have great patients. That's how this is, and I try to just I view it that way. I'm only that which God has made me, not less, not more, just what He made me, and that's all I need to be. I've just tried to do the best I can, and some days it's worked, and some days it hasn't. There's never been there's no perfect humans on the planet. I'll tell you that for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. Well, a couple more questions, a couple things I wanted to get to. First was to talk about some of the work you're doing outside of your practice. I know you've
Sure.
traveled all around the country and the world. How did that come to be, and what are the places you've gone, and what's driving you to go there and help?
I've had a very varied and uh, interesting, to me at least, journey in that I've believed a lot in public service. I mean, I've served in as the president of the United States Pharmacopoeia, which was the standard-setting body for drugs and pharmaceuticals, uh, oldest one in the world actually. No, the British are older than we are. But I did that for about 10 years, volunteered, and helped bring together a lot of stakeholders to advance the public health. And I did that in Washington, D.C. That took me to many of the countries where we developed product testing laboratories. USP is on the label of almost every little medication you see there. And that's something I came in through the California Medical Association. I did that. I've done mission work, lots of mission work in the jungles of Central America during the Civil War of the 80s. I worked in orphanages and helped bring medical records and life and some sort of identification to orphans who had lost their parents during the brutality of that Civil War in Guatemala. That flavored a lot of my existence and my worldview also. Um, I volunteer in the community. I do a lot of things on boards. Been on the Women's Shelter Board, for example. That's something I'm very happy with. American Cancer Society, uh, Central Coast Medical Association. I'm on the board of directors of Point Loma Nazarene University now, and the California Medical Association. But I believe real strongly that with the life that God gave me as a gift when I was a kid, I was going to do everything I can to repay Him for the time that He's given me extra. And so that drives a lot of my volunteerism. Because life should not be wasted. It's a precious, precious thing.
Yeah. And the other thing I was curious about is you've actually had the opportunity to meet quite a lot of presidents, as I
I have.
understand.
I have.
How does that work?
You know, I'm not a politician worshiper. I had a foray into politics because I believed that at one point that was a good way to help people, and it can be when done correctly. But in my forays into politics, yeah, I've met the only I've met the Bushes, Bill Clinton, um, uh, Ford. I did not meet Barack Obama face to face. I never have I met him, nor have I met Donald Trump. But I've been in the Oval Office. Uh, I remember I was there during the Clinton era and right after Waco, for example. But I've seen, and you know what I've learned about presidents? They're just humans. They're just like we. I mean, they are the same thing. I feel sorry for them. I really do, because it was at the time I was sitting in the White House, and one of the Secret Service people took me to the back room where Bill Clinton, had his little saxophone and stuff, and he had allergies. I could see the Flonase. I saw the allergy medicine sitting on the table. I said, "Man, this dude is suffering."
Yeah.
All the Kleenexes wastebasket. Symptoms. Those are people that get allergies have a lot of Kleenexes. And I remember thinking to myself, this guy is just a guy, you know. And at that point
Yeah.
on, I realized that, man, we got to pray for these guys. And so that's how,
Yeah.
I did it. The president Ronald Reagan. Oh man, forgot to mention the Gipper. I spent a half an hour with him when he was on his last uh, when he was in Century City for my 40th birthday. A good friend of mine got me in to meet him and the family. So I've met all these presidents, and you know, of the most endearing to me was Ronald Reagan. Honestly, he's not very tall. That's the other thing I was impressed. He always looked tall. Reagan was just maybe an inch taller than I was, and I remember sitting there thinking when we were talking, he had Alzheimer's, and the Secret Service told me not to move quickly around him because it would scare him, and it's true you don't do that around Alzheimer's patients. But he was warm, and he talked to each of my boys, took a picture with him. But all these things have been gifts to me from the Almighty of meeting people, you know. And then I realized at that point that all these guys are just human. They really are, and we just got to pray for them. They live in very hostile environments. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, it's pretty hostile out there for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, final question here, and we can end with this. This podcast is about normal people doing Jesus stuff. And my
Hmm.
hope in starting it was that people listening might think, well, if God can use Dr. Bravo, then he can use me. If God can use Travis, maybe he can use me. Because I think we all have this, we're all made in the image of a God who loves us, and we all have a
Amen.
purpose to our lives.
Amen.
And I think so often we just believe and shrink into the lie that we have no purpose. And so I'm curious, Dr. Bravo, what you would say, how you would encourage people who might feel like God can't use them or that they have no
I,
purpose.
I would tell them without question that is a lie of the enemy. That is a satanic lie. God can use everyone, and the only prerequisite is you have to be willing to be used. You have to be willing. You know, one of the frightening prayers, I'm going to say this frightening, is when you ask God, for example, bring someone to my path that needs you, that needs to be, you better be ready, because God doesn't waste any time in answering that prayer. That's the one prayer that frightens me, because you had better be serious about that prayer, because he will bring somebody in light speed right away, and you'll recognize them. You'll say, oh, that's what you're doing, because Lord, he wants that above all. He wants us to minister to each other. So we can, and you don't have to be the most theologically well versed. You don't have to be the most articulate. You don't have to have a fancy story. You just have to be willing, because people will see your heart. It's what they see. They will feel your spirit. They will see your heart. And that's what they will respond to.
That's great. Well, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for being on, and thank you for everything you've done for our family and those around the Central
You
Coast. We
have a
love you.
great you have a great family, Travis, and you know they are wonderful. I always enjoy seeing them, and Lord is using you. I went to New Life a few times. I've seen you lead worship. I didn't know you were a worship leader, and I thought, man, this guy can sing too. So,
I just fake it. It's all smoke and mirrors.
well, anyhow, well, Lord bless you. Thank you for this chance to talk, and you know, Lord bless you also and your whole family.
Thanks, Dr. B. Hope to see you soon.
All right, bye bye now.